The film department is supported by UNLV Film. At the film department of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, every story has a beginning. With degree programs for undergraduates and graduates, state-of-the-art equipment and facilities, incredible professional internships around the world, and expert guest speakers, students discover the power and potential of cinema as they prepare for the film and television industry and beyond. Learn more at unlv.edu/film. UNLV Film. Find your voice, tell your story.
Welcome to the Film Department, the official movie review podcast and more of UNLV Film. This semester, we'll be discussing film screening at our sister picture house, the Beverly Theater, Las Vegas's only independent theater and performance venue. I'm Davey Parks, a fourth-year film major about to graduate, and I'm really excited to talk about today's film. But first, I'm joined by...
Hello, I'm Jeff. I'm a third-year film major. I'm the president of Fright Club, and I am also excited to talk about today's movie, Davey.
Hello, I'm Simona. I am also a third-year film major, and I'm really excited to see what you guys have to say about this movie, and hopefully you'll get me on one of your sides.
UNLV is poised to become the best film school in the country.
Now, what we've learned about today is a game-changing opportunity to reinforce Las Vegas as the entertainment capital. Now, the possibility is now. Let's make this possible and make sure that your voices are heard in favor of Warner Brothers Studio Nevada. Can't wait to be back in town.
Today's panel is moderated by Dr. Heather Addison, Chair and Professor of UNLV Film. Dr. Addison has led the department for 9 years and teaches film history, criticism, and theory courses.
The former chair of UNLV Film, Dr. Hart Wegner, was good friends with Chuck Jones, one of those geniuses and a principal animator for Bugs Bunny. Chuck Jones recalled that a small child once told him, "You don't draw Bugs Bunny, you draw pictures of Bugs Bunny." And Jones later observed, quote, "That was a profound observation for me because it means he thinks that the characters are alive, which as far as I'm concerned is true. And I feel the same way about animation. It isn't an illusion of life, it is life." Quote. That is what Warner Brothers has produced for over a century. The magic of bringing life to the screen in its characters, stories, and stars. Warner Brothers has been part of the history of cinema every step of the way, since the very beginning, inspiring and delighting audiences all across the world. We look forward to collaborating with them for the next century of that incredible history.
But you know, I have the pleasure of wearing many, many different hats, but I know which hat I'm wearing today. For me, we're here for you guys, the students.
Yeah.
And what an exciting time for all of us to think we are going to grow an industry, not quite from the ground zero, but ensuring that we give an opportunity to every single person in all of our communities, that we create a workforce that mirrors our communities around us. What a unique opportunity. And you guys are on right at the beginning of this journey. And if we can join hands together, we're going to achieve something really special for the state of Nevada. Is our commitment to the state is content spend equaling or exceeding $8.5 billion over 15 years. We'll have a 14-stage facility, workshops, mill, offices, everything that is required to ensure we maximize the benefits that will come from the new tax incentive. We're going to get on and work with you guys now. We're not waiting to start a partnership for the legislation to pass. We're here for a reason. We believe in actions speak louder than words, and you're going to see a lot of this. So we hope to break ground somewhere around the last quarter of next year, and that's going to take 2 to 3 years to actually build a studio facility. But we want to get going pretty much straight away. So myself and colleagues have already been out speaking to the filmmaking community that already exists here. We've been talking to a number of the facilities that already exist here so that we could hit the ground running as soon as the bill passes. And I hope to see some of you on some of those shows that we're going to be making. WBD will host a series of panel discussions featuring industry experts to offer students valuable insights into career opportunities within the entertainment industry. I think we've done that.
Yeah.
Student Advisory Committee. In partnership with the UNLV, WBD will establish a Student Advisory Committee to provide input on this process. So you will have a voice in what this partnership means. We will provide UNLV students with an exclusive advanced screenings of upcoming films and TV premieres. We will offer 5 UNLV rising juniors and seniors a paid 6-week summer internship with a housing stipend at Warner Bros. Studios Burbank.
Yeah.
Providing hands-on experience in departments such as lighting, grip, costume property, studios post-production, etc. I think that's a pretty good step forward, don't you?
Before we dive into this week's movie, I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on at UNLV Film here. Recently, we just had an incredible talk with the folks over at Warner Brothers Discovery, I believe now, talking about the potential for the future of the film industry here in Las Vegas. There's been a lot of news in terms of the construction of new media campuses and film studios down here, as well as a lot of action going on in the legislature involving new tax incentives for film studios down here. And I kind of just wanted to reach out to you guys and see what your perspectives were. I'm about to graduate. You guys have about a year left. How you feeling about this new collaboration between the studio and UNLV and the sort of what the future of film in Vegas looks like?
Yeah, I went to the panel on Wednesday and I thought there was a lot of good information, and it seems like they're really eager to start working with students and they're really hopeful for what's to come. So, I don't know. I think this could lead to so many good opportunities, and that's pretty much what I got out of hearing what they had to say.
That's cool. I did not go to the panel. I saw the live stream. It seems great. It was a really great conversation. Yeah, I'm excited about it too. It's not something that I don't think we're going to be able to benefit from because we're both graduating, I think, within a year. It seems like they said it's going to take a couple of years to build the studio out here. Yeah. But for you future UNLV film students, I mean, good for you guys, man. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even like in retrospect, once we get our degrees, and when those few years come, I think, graduating from a film school that has such a tight association with the studios and the industry that's starting to flourish out here will be beneficial to us maybe in the long run. I'm just excited to finally have something outside of Mr. Beast videos and, sort of secondary film studios coming out here, having, that sort of involvement and getting to involve the local IATSE in film productions instead of, getting California crews out to come to Vegas to work on stuff. So just all in all, the future is looking pretty bright for UNLV film and just the film industry here in Vegas in general. So yeah, looking forward to it. I think it's time to discuss this week's movie, which is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, directed by Terry Gilliam, released in 1998, I believe?
98, yeah.
98. Palme d'Or nominee, did not win. Very polarized reviews when it came out. Some people loved it, some people hated it. I'll go ahead and ask you guys, what are your thoughts on this movie? Starting with Simona.
I am very much in the middle. There are things that I love about this movie and other things that just kind of like really frustrate me about it. And I've seen this twice, and it seems like both times I kind of got exhausted by the end.
Certainly, it's a very exhausting movie. I totally get that. I guess just a little bit of backstory. I had always heard about Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, mostly good things. And my first time watching it was, I don't know if, I'm sure you guys know, but Barnes & Noble has their semi-annual Criterion Collection sale. Mm-hmm. So I went and I saw it and I was like, I bought it. And that's something I don't normally do. I don't usually like to buy movies before seeing them because I'm like, I don't want to waste, $20. But I took a chance because I was like, I have a feeling I'm going to like this movie. It just seems, I love sort of like, psychedelic odysseys. So I was like, this seems like my type of movie. And I absolutely loved it. I've seen it this was like probably a year ago. In the past year, I've probably seen it like 5 times, honestly. And it just gets better for me each time. I've read the book. I think it's a truly, truly great movie. And I'm excited to debate with you about this one, Davey.
So not to psychoanalyze you, but me thinks you were trying to justify that purchase after watching the movie.
No.
So
that's what I was thinking.
If you couldn't guess, I do not like this movie. I think just to quickly go over how I feel about it, I think this is a very gluttonous movie in terms of, it has a lot in the way of style and not a whole lot in the way of substance. I'm a big fan of the book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. I remember I read it for a high school English assignment and just really found myself sinking into it. And I was so excited to watch the movie. And I watched the movie and I didn't enjoy it. And I, a few years later, I thought, well, maybe I should give it another chance. Watched it again, didn't enjoy it. And this time for the podcast, I decided, well, I didn't like those last few times, but maybe there was something I missed that I will see now. And I just did not enjoy it again. I think what I'm always surprised about is how much of this movie I don't remember. And I think that sort of speaks to how much of it just kind of passes me by. A movie with the insanity and the just crazy things that go on in it, you feel like you would remember a lot of the stuff that happens in it. But I'd say I watched this movie and a good 60% of it just goes right out the other ear. But yeah, I guess in terms of why you guys kind of attach it, like why, what works for you personally?
Everything. I love it. I mean, I have also read the book as well. I knew Hunter S. Thompson. I think if you've heard of him, you just know him as like the drug guy. That's what he's known for. He's like this journalist that is just taking a ton of drugs and drinking and writing these really crazy articles. And so I knew that, and I saw the movie first. I didn't read the book, but after I saw the movie, literally the day after, I got the audiobook and I listened to it all in like one day. It's a quick read. It's not a very long book. But what really struck me was, wow, this is a great adaptation because there are literally like monologues line for line that are taken directly from the book. There are moments that are literally taken word for word from the book. I love Hunter S. Thompson's writing. In terms of like the movie, I know we're not talking about the book. In terms of the movie, what works for me, I mean, it's just a lot. First of all, I think that it's a movie that I think is a bit misunderstood. And I think a lot of that comes from the perception of this movie. I think you can trace that back to something as simple as the marketing for it, right? When you go back and you watch the original trailer for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, it was marketed as like this wacky, silly, Johnny Depp, Benicio del Toro, Fear and like, you know what I mean? Like that type of, and it's not that movie at all. I think it's on the surface, it is absolutely a drug movie. It's a stoner movie, but I think there's a lot more going on underneath the surface in terms of a commentary. It's, as I told my friend earlier, I think it's like an obituary for the counterculture of the 60s. And it delves really deep into sort of what happened to that culture, the acid culture, and what happened to those people and how burnt out they were in the early 70s, and we can like get further into it. But I think that there's just a lot going on beneath the surface of this movie, besides obviously the fun, comedy, drugged out, whoa, we're high on acid. But Yeah, and, just really great performances. Johnny Depp is so good as Raoul Duke, Hunter S. Thompson. And if you've, seen Hunter S. Thompson in interviews, he just captures his mannerisms so perfectly while also putting those, Johnny Depp-isms in it for sure. I think Benicio del Toro is great. I think just performances-wise, everything is great here. You have so many just really awesome, not celebrity, but just big actor names who show up for, one scene. I mean, obviously, Tobey Maguire was, the big one. This is pre-Spider-Man Tobey Maguire. Everyone who's in it is memorable. Cameron Diaz, Flea has a very memorable moment in the movie as well. So, I mean, there's a lot that I love. I won't get too in depth yet, but yeah, I would say that for me, this just, I can't think of a single thing in this movie that really doesn't work for me, honestly. So,
for me, I love how visually insane it is. It is such a stimulating movie. I mean, it's just... I love the look of it. It's great. The production design is great. Of course, the performances are great. I just don't like that there is such a heavy focus on these drug-induced states, because I think that they kind of belittle the commentary that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. It's I kind of just realized that watching it the second time, but I mean, being familiar with Hunter S. Thompson's work and the book, I haven't read it, but I'm still familiar with kind of... what it focuses on. Mm-hmm. I feel like that commentary should have been highlighted a bit more, and you just forget it while watching these crazy moments.
Yeah. I guess starting with one of my biggest gripes with the movie is I think as an adaptation, I personally think it's incredibly lazy. I think the movie approaches the adaptation. I was reading about how they sort of went about adapting the book, and the screenwriter himself said we cannibalized the story in terms of just everything that's in the book happens in the movie, and like Jeffrey said, there are just entire monologues and direct lines which are just lifted off the page and put into the screen, and I think that doesn't really do anything with the story. I think a much more interesting and a much more engaged film would have been much more critical of Hunter S. Thompson and this sort of idea of excess. I feel that so much of this, this movie starts at such a high octane, level 10 point. And I think, Simona, this is kind of what you were getting at, is these characters are high for the entire movie. Mm-hmm. There's, I don't think, a single point in the film where they are sober. And to that extent, it's really hard to ground your audience in it. I think this movie is visually very inspired, but the downside of that is with every scene being just such heightened colors, such heightened psychedelic vibes and all that, you don't get a time to appreciate any of the individual shots or scenes in isolation, because whatever you're looking at that's visually very cool is followed up by something that's even more visually gluttonous or excessive. I think as a whole, this movie feels to me very bloated. It's almost 2 hours long, and I don't think it justifies the runtime at all. I think this could have been an hour and 20 minutes, just because I feel like so much of these scenes are just, character who's high on drugs goes to one place, has a trip, and then we bleed into the next scene where they're also high on drugs, tripping, to no extent. It keeps going, and I feel like if this movie had a bit more structure or even a bit more teeth, I do like the idea that this movie is sort of this obituary to the counterculture, but I think for that kind of statement to have any meaning, I think there would need to be some kind of theme or motif or some kind of element to it that made it more than just this collection of scenes of tripping people in casinos and in hotel rooms. But yeah.
Well, I guess my first question would be, what book did you read? Because in terms of that book, it doesn't have a structure really either. It plays out very similarly in terms of you have scene after scene of just, Raoul and Dr. Gonzo, who are plugins for Hunter, and then his friend Oscar Zeta Acosta, who was a Chicano lawyer and activist.
Before you keep going, the real story that Leaving Las Vegas was based off of, way more interesting than the actual book itself, even though I love the book. But to kind of build off that, I think that sort of rambling nature works a lot better in a literary form than it does in a visual one, simply because reading someone's thoughts jotted down in such a frenetic manner really communicates the sort of mind state that they're in. But when we're visually watching that and we see Johnny Depp, having these very wide-eyed stares, walking with this bow-legged walk, and they're talking to each other about mescaline and mushrooms and cocaine, we already know that they're very out there. I can only watch that for so long before I go, okay, well, give me something else. Give me something I can actually think about, something I can actually bite into.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this movie is a lot of fat and not a lot of bone.
Well, first of all, Leaving Las Vegas and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas are two different stories.
Oh, yes.
No, it's okay.
I knew I was going to do that at some point.
Leaving Las Vegas, so
That's
that
okay,
was, yeah.
I mean, I get what you're saying. I think, there's a lot of movies that I can draw comparisons to in terms of movies that are about excess. One that I just recently rewatched not that long ago would be The Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, that's a very chaotic movie. That's a movie about excess. And this is also a movie that's about excess. I think that's the exact point. I mean, in terms of bones and wanting to find something to latch onto, I just don't really think that was ever the intention. I don't think that was Thompson's intention when he wrote the book, was that he wanted the audience or the readers to be invested in these characters and emotionally invested. I just don't think that was the intent. So for me, that was never really a problem, that I couldn't get emotionally attached to Raoul or Dr. Gonzo. It's a movie, again, like I said, it's about excess, and it's about this idea having these characters constantly not sober, constantly on drugs. It adds to that sort of frenetic energy. And again, it all kind of leads back to, you said there's no theme. I think there is a theme, 100%. I think in the book and in the movie. And you could just go to the subtitle of the book, which is A Savage Journey into the Heart of the American Dream. And these are, again, we're lamenting the downfall of the counterculture. We're lamenting the downfall of the drug culture. And these are the I would say caricatures, because again, they're not characters. These aren't real people. And even Thompson himself has said that. He said that, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, right? We have to talk about Gonzo journalism, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea of Gonzo, which is 100% attributed to Thompson. Yeah. The idea is that this is a first-person subjective account of an objective event, of an objective story. So, the original story is that he was, assigned to cover the Mint 400 in Las Vegas in the early 70s. But I mean, you even mentioned, I think it was more interesting, the real story. Well, the real story was that he was in the hotel room the entire time writing. So I mean, I totally understood. It started as a piece of Gonzo journalism where it was going to be this is my story of how I went to Vegas to cover the Mint 400 and I took a bunch of drugs. But it quickly became fiction. It's not a piece of Gonzo journalism. It's a piece of fiction because he realized, this is kind of boring. I'm just in my hotel room the whole time. I need to spruce it up and have more outrageous things. So for me, that kind of keeps my attention, the fact that it's not just a writer who's just in his hotel room the whole time doing a bunch of drugs and writing. That's certainly a part of it, but you have so many great visual moments. I mean, from the reptilian zoo when he's high on acid. I mean, that's just a great movie moment. My personal favorite sequence in this entire movie is the adrenochrome sequence, lifted again directly from the book. Adrenochrome is not a real drug, but the effects of it, it's such a great shot sequence. I mean, you have this super wide angle lens. It turns hellish red. It's such a great, almost horrifying moment. It's straight out of a horror movie. And so, again, for me, it's not so much I don't see Fear and Loathing as a piece of great drama of oh my God, these characters, I'm so invested in it. It's more of again, it's an exercise in style. It's an exercise in how outrageous and, just how decadent can we make it. And so that just, I think it's personal for everybody, but for me, that doesn't really lose me, honestly. If anything, it makes me appreciate it more because it knows what it wants to be. It commits to what it wants to be. It doesn't pretend to be anything else, and it does have a central theme. I think you just have to really kind of look past and that's obviously really hard to do. I get it because it's a very the drugs and the excess is very much at the forefront, but there's a lot, I think, under the surface, and everything from, I mean, just the opening of this movie, it starts with these images of Vietnam, the war, the protests. There's just so much going on. There's an American flag in almost every scene. So I mean, I guess to each his own, but yeah, for me, that's a big reason why this movie works, for me at least.
Yeah, I understand the point of excess, and I mean having it set in Las Vegas also really
right.
plays to that. But I just I mean, involving like Vietnam War, like, you know, all of this focus on, I guess this focus on American counterculture and the American dream. And I think it is just lost in the excess. Like, I just really, I totally forget about all that. And I just think that it would give the film a bit more substance and just make it a bit more hearty. I don't know. I really love everything like visual about it. But then it just gets to a point where I'm just like, how many more of these like hallucinations can I watch? It kind of gets terrifying for me at some point. So I'm like, how are they like alive? I don't know.
I think, you know, the idea of excess is an interesting one, and figuring out how to display excess on film. But I think anybody can put a buffet of colors and visuals and frenetic energy. How many times have we said frenetic this episode? Frenetic editing and just combinations of like these really interesting visual elements, and, you know, say like, oh, well, yeah, my movie's about excess and it's about gluttony. But why? Like that, I think that's my big question. Is I walked away from this movie being like, okay, well, why was any of this important? I think the version of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas that I would have been more interested in seeing in terms of structure would have followed like the structure of a drug trip. You know, you have the come up, you have the peak, and then you have the come down. I think had we had that, you know, if we started with a sober or at least grounded Hunter S. Thompson and Raoul, like, you know, just all of the two guys, if they were more grounded at the start of the beginning and had that come up and that peak and that come down, I feel like that would have been a much more visually interesting thing to watch. Because if we're starting at 11, by the time we get to the peak where they take the adrenochrome and, you know, we're doing these really cool things with color and with camera angle where, you know, we're changing the shape of the lens to, you know, better suit the effects that each drug has that they take. And we're pulling the focus in certain ways to show, you know, their state of minds. It's like you said, Simona, I feel like it's all kind of lost. I think it gets sort of muddled because we've spent the last hour and 40 minutes just in a constant state of visual sensory overload.
Yeah. I think I had read somewhere that someone did kind of relate the movie itself to kind of like the I guess the progress of being on drugs. And I just didn't understand that. Yeah, I just didn't get that at all.
I think
but I think it would be interesting for it to be structured that way.
And I think there's more things that they could have played with in terms of the passage of time. You know, we this movie has a lot of really interesting visual stuff with color and composition and just like, oh, like now we're imagining lizards and dinosaurs and
I do love that.
Yeah,
part.
the Check-in lady is a Maury eel now.
Yes.
But I think, you know, there's other things that they could have played with, like the editing and the passage of time in the film, which I feel like is not at all accurate to what it's like being in the state of mind. I wouldn't know personally. I've never taken a drug ever in my life. And I think that really speaks to this movie being more about how can we make the audience feel and say, wow, that was really cool, rather than actually engage with what I think you're getting at, Jeffrey, is like the theme and thinking about the death of the counterculture.
Well, a few things. I mean, well, you mentioned the idea, because I've heard that before, too. I've heard a few people say, like, I think the movie should have started with them sober and then kind of gradually went up. I completely disagree. One, again, that's not how the book starts. It starts exactly the same way the book starts with, is, you know, we were somewhere on Barstow on the edge of the desert when the drugs began to take hold, and you just immediately have that awesome shot of the red, I think it's a Corvette. I'm not sure what kind. I'm not a car guy. But anyways, I love that it starts at 100 and it just keeps at 100 for the whole movie. I also think there are like moments that it does bring down the pacing quite a bit. My personal favorite sequence in the entire, well, I know I said the adrenochrome. There's so many great moments. This is a great movie, guys. But the adrenochrome sequence is great. But also, I think just it's also, in my opinion, the best part of the book as well is the San Francisco 60s flashback sequence where you have, first of all, you have Jefferson Airplane singing a great song, Somebody to Love. You have Raoul going to the bathroom and he spills acid on his sleeve. You have Flea who's licking the acid off. And you have that great monologue. I wish I had it with me. I don't have it memorized, but just this really great sort of encapsulation of the zeitgeist of hippie culture and what it felt like to be there, what it felt like to know that you were a part of that moment. And as somebody who's always admired that culture, like I'm just like, wow, that's such a great just summary of what it must have been like. I also think that another great moment where the movie's pacing comes down. It's a very probably the most horrifying part of the movie is the diner sequence at the end with the waitress. That's a very like realistic scene, like everything from the setting, the acting. It kind of like seems like the one moment where they're not high. I mean, well, except for probably Gonzo, but it's just such a great like it lets things breathe a little bit. It lets I don't know, like for me, like the pacing. I don't think that it's like constantly moving, but I think it does have moments where it comes down. But also in terms of the idea of like simulating the structure like a drug trip where you have the come up and then you have the peak and you have the come down. That's not the trip that they're going on in the book either. Like in the book, the idea is not that they're not taking one drug and then it's like they're going to be. No, the idea is that they're taking multiple. And speaking as somebody who has not done acid or mescaline, from what I understand, the idea is that when you get really deep into like these really hardcore drug trips, you are taking other drugs to combat the effects that are maybe not as good, right? Like maybe you're getting paranoid, you're getting anxiety, like that great sequence in these. It's called the Bazooka Circus.
It's supposed to be the circus.
It's the circus.
Yeah.
In the book, it's even the circus. I don't know. I guess they couldn't get the rights to it for whatever reason. But either way, you have that great moment, and you have Dr. Gonzo says like, I think I'm getting the fear, and so I was like, well, what happens when you get the fear? Well, you need something to like get rid of that. So in their case, it's like it's cocaine, and then it's acid, and then it's and so they're constantly moving from drug to drug because they're trying to combat those effects. So I don't think Thompson's intention was for the structure to simulate what it's like to take a drug. It's more like, no, these guys are just on this insane binge, and that's what the movie feels like. It feels like a binge. It feels like you're constantly moving from one state of mind to the next, and that's reflected in everything from the camera work, from the lighting. Like each I forget the name of the cinematographer of this movie, but I was reading this really great article earlier that he was talking about the way they shot it, and each drug has its own look and feel in terms of how it was shot, right? Like acid is very sort of wide lenses. You get to the mescaline, it's very sort of tight and very claustrophobic. So in terms of like each drug moment, for me, what keeps it engaging, at least with me, is the fact that it's constantly changing the look. It's not like keeping a consistent look. Each drug has its own flavor almost, and so that keeps me on my toes. It keeps me excited to see, okay, what's next? And then you get to adrenochrome, and it's like you're suddenly in hell. You know what I mean? And then you're going there. I was just thinking about this too. I do think there is one moment where they are sober, which would be, I think, the scene in the restaurant when Raoul I don't know, maybe they probably are drunk or something, who knows, but I mean, that's kind of like a bit of a, like, they're not, like as crazy and drugged up, but yeah,
They did leave without paying.
They did, yeah. Also,
I think that's just
them.
Well, Thompson said that was so, because they asked Thompson, the writer of the book, like, what did you think of the movie? And he gave it a glowing review. He said, like, I love it. I think it's a perfect adaptation. The one thing he objected to was in that sequence, Raoul throws change at the little person waiter, and he's like, I would never do that. Like, that was too much. So it's like, okay, well, that's what he had to say about it.
I think two things. Like, I think for me, this idea that like, oh, it's like a perfect adaptation, again, just goes back to like, man, I think people think it's a perfect adaptation because it's just the book. I don't think it takes any creative liberties with the story. I don't think it really goes out of its way to sort of challenge the narrative or the character of Hunter S. Thompson, or just what the book meant to the people who read it when it came out. I think I'd be more interested in watching one that was maybe a bit more critical of, the sort of person and perspective that both made the story and who the story was meant for. But then again, talking about, things are constantly changing. It's this very, sort of fluid movie where we're constantly being treated with a new drug, a new camera lens, a new camera angle, new visuals, something that is going to change our perspective. Again, if there's nothing to ground us in the first place. It just becomes a sort of slideshow of excess at that point. I think for me, I was just like, I was waiting for a bone to be thrown where I could like, I've said this before and I'll say it again, like sink my teeth into something I could be like, okay, this is a motif, or this is a theme, or this is a hard sort of story narrative beat that I can pick up and go, okay, how does this sort of affect the rest of the story? Whereas I think the nature of the film is so fluid that nothing really feels like it affects what comes before or after it. It's just a sequence of events. And up until the end, like you said, with the scene with the waitress in the diner, I think everything before that just feels sort of, what's the word I'm thinking of?
Amazing, really good, fun, great movie.
It lacks consequence. And I think by the end of the movie, when Hunter S. Thompson, walks into the sunset and the movie's over and the credits roll, nothing has changed, nothing has, evolved, and I haven't been challenged in any way as an audience member. I was just kind of spoon-fed a bunch of visual dessert and expected to enjoy it.
Well, to me, it sort of sounds like you don't like the book then, because I mean, it is a very close adaptation. There are things that are changed, but I mean, it sounds like the version you want is a more grounded version of the book, and I just don't think that was ever the intention. I know that like Scorsese, Oliver Stone, like it was in development for a very, very long time. They've been trying to get the movie, and for the longest time, Hollywood considered it an unadaptable book because of the things you just said. There's no character development. By the end of the movie, they're the exact same people they were before, right? Because again, it's not about, I just don't see it as that type of story. It's not that type of movie. It's not the type of thing where like, no, I need to like invest in what's going on with these people. It's about just sort of like going along for the trip, going along for the ride.
Well, I think that's the thing is, again, like I think telling a story in a narrative form versus in a literary form are very different. Whereas in a literary form, you were being very active. You're choosing to turn the page. You're choosing to read the next paragraph. You're choosing to keep coming back to the book if you don't finish it in one sitting. And that sort of plays that sort of idea of, be along for the ride, be along for the trip, let it all happen to you. It's one big crazy party of excess. Plays a lot differently when you're choosing to go back and read the story and read what he's writing, as opposed to when you're passive and you're sort of held hostage by the movie. If I'm sitting in a theater seat and I'm watching a movie, I don't want a movie to hold me hostage and just say, like, look at all this crazy stuff, watch it, enjoy it, don't think about it. Whereas with a literary with the literary version, you're being asked to think about, why is he writing it like this? Why is this playing out the way it's playing out? Gonzo journalism, like how much you're actively being asked to ask, well, how much of this is true and how much of this is stuff that he's actually just making up. Whereas with the movie, we're supposed to take it kind of at face value, and we are with the narrator and the main character.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I also feel like, I think one thing you're overlooking too is that most people probably aren't going to read the book. They're more attracted to the movie in the first place. They should, by the way, absolutely. If you've seen Fear and Loathing, if you like Fear and Loathing, you should go read the book because it's awesome. But I mean, there's a lot of other things too. Like one thing I was reading was when Gilliam was making this movie in the late 90s, it was the production company was Universal, and they wanted him to update the story to the 90s, not the 70s. And he said no, because if I do that, one, you're just completely getting rid of the entire point, which again is this theme of the downfall of the counterculture, right? But also just it's like you're apologizing for the book, is what he said. And I'm not here to apologize for anything. I want to make a movie that is like exactly what Thompson would have wanted, which is a very just sort of direct adaptation of that vision. And I think he succeeded on all fronts. I know we're not going to agree on this. I feel like we could move on to other things too as well. I just want to bring up, it's also really funny. This is a really funny movie. There's so many great lines. I mean, the whole poor bastard, he'll see those goddamn bats soon enough. The lizard sequence is so hilarious. I mean, it's just a really funny movie. There's also really great physical comedic acting from Del Toro and from Depp where they're falling down. I mean, they're just giving 110% into these performances. It's so fun to watch. It's so funny. I don't know. Do you have anything for humor-wise?
I thought it was funny at first, and then it kind of lost that, and turned the complete opposite for me. But like hearing what you guys are saying, I have not read the book, so I feel like it's kind of difficult for me to. I mean, I can't speak on that, but it's kind of difficult for me to really, really get a perspective on this movie as a whole, I think, without having read the book. But yeah, hearing both of your sides is really. I just can't, I just don't know what to think. Like, I'm still, like, very divided on this because I love how meticulous the visual stuff is. But then, again, it just kind of, like, holds you hostage. Yeah. And I just couldn't do that when it got to a certain point.
Roger Ebert made a joke in his review that if these were characters that you met in an elevator, you would get off at the next floor. But because it's a movie, you're forced to sit with them for the whole 2 hours. And I couldn't have said it better myself. I don't find a lot of this movie funny. I think, it just really must have gone right over my head, but I think these characters are kind of boring and trite. I think they're really one note. And I don't think that's particularly interesting. And I think you can make, the argument that like, this movie isn't trying to make a big statement and it is just, a visual feast for the eyes, but that's not particularly interesting to me.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not very accessible to a lot of audiences when you just kind of make it this visual feast and have no substance when it comes to the characters or the meaning of the excess or kind of understanding that as the movie goes along.
Well, it's important to note too, this is a movie that flopped when it came out. Yeah. It did. You're right. Roger Ebert, shat on it. By the way, he also didn't like The Thing either, so I don't really go too much for Roger Ebert.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
So, I mean, he called it like a one joke movie, which is fine. That's his opinion. I personally think there's more than one joke. But, this was a movie that when it came out, again, it didn't find its audience. And a lot of that was the marketing. It was marketed as this, silly, goofy comedy. And sure, there is a lot of dark comedy elements. There's also, I think there's a road trip element. There's a psychedelic odyssey element. There's a lot going on in this movie. But exactly what you guys are saying, like I would imagine if Terry Gilliam, is he alive? I don't know if he's dead or alive. I think is he still alive? He's alive. Okay. I think if Terry Gilliam was here right now, he would tell you both, hey, that's exactly what I wanted you to feel. I wanted you to feel trapped by this movie. I wanted you to feel like it's just constantly getting worse and worse and worse, and it's constantly closing you in. That's exactly the emotion that he wanted you to feel. Now, whether or not you guys liked it, that's totally subjective. That's up to you guys. But that was 100% the intention. That was the point. And this is it's not a mainstream. I mean, it is kind of mainstream, right? You have like big name actors. You have a big name director. It's Universal. But I feel like from the get-go, this was meant to be a cult movie. This is a movie that is divisive, and Gilliam has said that himself too, that this is a movie that you're either going to really love or you're going to really hate. It's very rare that you get a Simona who's like in the middle, right? But
I think I am leaning towards one side now.
That's fine. That's fine. Hey, it's a cult movie. It's a movie that you want to see at a midnight screening, maybe even at the Beverly. Hello. But you want to see it in a theater with a packed audience. I can't tell you whether or not to be intoxicated, but that's totally up to you. It might make the movie better, by the way, just saying, who knows.
But I do think, like, with that in mind, that, like, okay, this movie is trying to be confrontational. It's trying to sort of test your patience and your ability to watch things unfold. I don't think there's anything particularly experimental or new that it's doing that other movies haven't done before or better. I think in terms of like a sort of Gauntlet-esque, sit and watch this movie and see how long you guys can watch these two men just spiral into their drug addictions. That doesn't, I can't figure out why this is worth, $20 for a ticket. Like I can't picture why this is sort of worth the critical acclaim that a lot of people give it. Simply just because it misses me.
Well, it's not critically acclaimed. I mean, if you look on Rotten Tomatoes, I think it has like a 50 something. So it wasn't a critically acclaimed movie. And I think even the audience score, not that Rotten Tomatoes is a great meter for like whether or not a movie's good, but even the audience score is rotten too. I mean, so like, again, this is a movie that has like a very specific niche audience. I also just want to bring this as like a last ditch, like, oh my God, this is another great thing about this movie, guys. I am somebody who loves a good soundtrack. I don't think this is the best. I would probably give that to either Dazed and Confused or Almost Famous, but that's also because I love 70s rock music.
Yeah, you like prog rock.
I do. I love me some prog rock. And man, this is a great soundtrack. And there's so many good songs in it. First of all, you have the opening. You have this really awesome cover of These Are a Few of My Favorite Things from the Lennon Sisters. You have Bob Dylan. You have the awesome closing Jumping Jack Flash from the Rolling Stones. You have two of the best Jefferson Airplane songs, Somebody to Love and White Rabbit.
I agree. I do love Jefferson Airplane.
Yes, they're amazing. Jefferson Airplane's awesome, and their music is like front and center, and they have two songs. The White Rabbit sequence is iconic in this movie, the throwing the radio in the tub, and he throws a grapefruit at his head, a great comedic moment there too. So yeah, like this is a great soundtrack. There's so many it envelops you in what it felt like to be there in the 70s. It gives you that vibe. This movie just oozes 70s. Another thing I want to also bring up too, talking about the cinematography, there's a choice in this movie that I think came out of necessity, but I think it's an awesome stylistic choice. I love the sequences when they're driving through 70s Vegas because, as you guys I'm sure can tell, it's rear projection. And the images that we're seeing are footage from an from an old show called Vegas, which was like had this footage of Vegas in the 70s because they were filming in the 90s, and I think they'd shot a little bit in actual Vegas. Like I think maybe like the Golden Nugget, they might have shot some exteriors there, but for the most part they couldn't shoot in Vegas in the 90s because Vegas in the 90s looks nothing like 70s Vegas. And so the way they had to do that was a combination of a bunch of different effects. You have the rear projection, you have like just really great effects, and it really, for me at least, even though you can tell it's rear projection, it just kind of contributes again to that sort of surreal style. It's not supposed to be very realistic looking. I mean, yes, it's not realistic, but it is such an awesome depiction of what that would feel like. I think it captures Vegas just amazingly. I love the way Vegas is depicted in this movie.
All right, well, final thoughts. Gluttony. I just think this movie is very bloated and very gluttonous. And I just don't feel like there's much I can say about it in way of substance. It's just a whole lot of style. And maybe that's what some people enjoy about it. But I personally think a movie should have plot and characters and a structure. But yeah, I think in way of a story adaptation, like, Jeff, you said, it's a very faithful adaptation to the literary form. But that's about all I can say about it. What about you, Simona?
I think I'm more on your side, but
Okay,
not
great.
completely. I totally get you, Jeff, in some ways. Yes, I get it. But yeah, like I've said, I love everything visual about it. But I just got really, I guess, overwhelmed being stuck in that constant cycle of all these drug-induced hallucinations. And yeah, I mean, the performances are great, but I did lack substance in the film.
Go see it at the Beverly. Go watch it. Go enjoy it. And then whenever you have a party and you want something on the TV, put it on. It makes it's a great party movie.
That,
Something you can check in and, be a little drunk, leave, come back 20 minutes later. It doesn't matter.
Well, let me also just say this too, real quick. As somebody who has feasted on Thanksgiving dinners and has drunk a lot of beer before, there's nothing wrong with being bloated, guys. All right, like I'm not trying to fat shame anyone out there. Being bloated is just fine. This is a bloated movie, absolutely. I think it's a great movie. You should absolutely watch it. Yes, it's a great party movie, but again, I feel like you guys aren't giving it enough credit. There's so much underneath the surface of this movie. This movie is an obituary for the counterculture. It is a farewell to this culture that was absolutely murdered by America. Like when you look in the history of what happened, you have this great social change that was going on in the 60s where you have the civil rights movement, you have the sexual revolution, you have the drug revolution, and you have this great culture that emerges from it. And some of the greatest art of ever made comes from that. Some of the greatest movies, you have New Hollywood, you have this great rock music that comes from it. And this is a culture that was just in my opinion, it was murdered by America. You have these old white politicians who are like, no, we hate these dirty hippies. You have the Manson murders, and you have no, they're dirty and they stink and they murder people. And no, forget the hippies. But it's like, guys, the whole point of that movement was a very left social change, and it was about peace and love, and it was absolutely eradicated. It's the death of the American dream. Dream. Just to kind of close out, I just want to say there's a great quote by George Carlin, who's a famous comedian. He's also a very famous counterculture figure as well. He said that the reason it's called the American Dream is because you have to be asleep to believe in it. And I think that that's what this movie absolutely captures. So.
That not only concludes this episode of the Film Department talking about Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, but that concludes this season with me, Jeff, and Simona. Do you guys have any parting thoughts or words you want to share with our audience?
This has been a very cool and new experience for me. I have really enjoyed hearing your guys' thoughts. A lot of, different perspectives that I had never thought about. And I really, appreciate that I got to experience this with you guys.
Yeah, it was great working with you guys. You guys know your when it comes to movies. I could not have asked for two better co-hosts. I want to thank our producer, Adam Paul, and Rudy. You guys have been great. You've guided us through it. It's been a really great experience. I also just have to take this moment to shout out the 3 people in my life who actually do listen to these episodes. My best friend, Nathan. Hi, Nathan. Love you, pal. My mom and my brother. Those are the only 3 people in my life who have actually bothered listening to these episodes. So thank you guys for listening. It's been fun for me, and I hope you guys have enjoyed hearing our thoughts. And yeah, guys, have a great Thanksgiving, great Christmas break, and that's it for me.
Oh, so sweet. I also want to shout out Angelica and Sam. Thank you
Yeah.
for all the
Absolutely.
help you
Thank
guys
you.
do. Like Jeff said, I couldn't have asked for 2 better co-hosts. You guys are just incredible. Jeff, so funny. Everything you say is just incredible. And Simona, your input is always so appreciated. You're so articulate, and I love hearing everything you have to say. Honestly, you guys, this has been such a blast. I'm going to shout out some people too. Shout out the Barrick team, everyone at the Marjorie Barrick Museum of Art. Shout out to my boyfriend Floyd, and shout out to everyone else who listened to this podcast and who, told me, just go for it. I couldn't thank you guys enough. And, go see movies at the Beverly, go see movies at Regal, go see movies at AMC, go watch movies. That's the biggest thing you can take away from this, if I had anything, is, if there's a movie out there that you're thinking of maybe seeing, go see it. Doesn't matter. Watch more movies. Media is important. Film is art, and art is important, and art is the reason why we live our lives. So with that being said, you guys, I think it's time to head out. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Adios.
Imagined by the Rogers Foundation, the Beverly Theater brings cinematic connectivity, novel collaborations, live happenings, cultural portals, and a zest for independent spirits to downtown Las Vegas. With a mission to stage uncommon cinematic, literary, and live experiences, the Beverly Theater is Las Vegas's first and only independent film house, storytelling arena, and live music venue. Check out our event calendar at thebeverlytheater.com.